This week, Mercedes-Benz returns to Chapman's Peak 30 years after a motorist survived a deadly plunge, which resulted in one of South Africa's most famous television ads. Also, why a luxury whiskey brand continues its backing of good ideas for social change. A heartwarming new tourism advertising campaign that celebrates same-sex marriage, and how a local ad agency is helping its clients create successful mobile-first campaigns, all in order to effectively reach the modern consumer.
Imagine you are Christopher White driving home. You're extremely tired and not watching the road properly.
From what I understand, they didn't think he could possibly have survived it.
The mechanical crunching sound was frightening.
In our line of work, certain things just stick in your mind when they stand out, and that was one of them.
Think of a 30-story building. That's the drop.
Christopher White survived this 100-meter plunge for two reasons. He was wearing his seatbelt and he was driving a Mercedes-Benz.
I don't know. Okay. You serious? Well, I mean, they're not going to put me behind the wheel if it doesn't work. I must be honest, I'm actually scared of the car.
So, as you've just seen, Mercedes-Benz making a triumphant return to Chapman's Peak in Cape Town 30 years after that memorable ad, that memorable campaign about a driver surviving a deadly plunge in one of their vehicles. Miles Barner is with us, marketing manager for Mercedes-Benz, and Brad Riley from the agency Network BBDO, to tell us a little bit more about this latest iteration and what a good idea it is. It's so nice to see it. I know that you guys were very young when that ad was first made. I remember it. How did this eventually come onto our television screens?
So the accident happened in 1988. Christopher White, as you know, kind of took his plunge. And it got a bit of press coverage, but then some of the clever people back in the day at Sonnenberg, Murphy, Leo Burnett, came across the article. Interesting fact is the writer on the ad's name was Chris White.
Yes.
And that's how he noticed it. And obviously Mercedes-Benz was their client at the time. And look, this ad basically wrote itself. If you come across a story like that and Mercedes-Benz is your client, you make an ad about it.
And the reaction at the time was phenomenal, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It was a massive, massive talking point, something that the organization has really been proud of for many years. The reaction is equally as exciting now with the revisit to Chapman's Peak, I can tell you.
I want to get to the revisit in just a moment,
Sure.
but the history's fun. At the time of the Mercedes-Benz ad, your arch rival, BMW, then came up with an ad that really went for the jugular. But I suppose you'll also tell me that it was probably quite good for both brands.
Look, I think it certainly got conversations going, and the public enjoys the rivalry between the two brands. So at the time, the response was taken in good faith with us as well. But the ad itself from Mercedes-Benz proved a point around what we needed to get across in terms of the amount of safety features we put in our vehicles. And the statement that we made at the time, engineered like no other car in the world.
Came close, Brad, to comparative advertising at the time, didn't it? I think it might have ended up with the authorities.
Yeah, I don't think that commercial lasted for too long.
Yeah.
I think it was pulled off, made its little impact. Not the only people to parody it or spoof it. So it's,
Why
flattering.
don't we make car ads like these anymore?
Locally, we don't make a lot of car ads anymore. There's Global kind of makes car ads. They've got to appeal to a global audience, which I think then you miss some of the local relevance. This is a particularly local ad, even 30 years ago. But I think with where the marketing landscape has gone, we build in that local relevance through pieces like this, using social media, digital, etc.
So, Miles, 30 years on, why the reprise? Why have you decided to go back to this?
You know, it's around human-centered innovation. This technology that exists is very much in a process on the road to autonomous driving. So this is many years of research and development by our parent company, Daimler. And we thought this was an opportune moment to use this example to show how an accident could be prevented because of the safety systems that these cars
So that makes perfect sense. So Brad Riley picked the story up for us. You had to find Chris White.
We had to find Chris
How did you do that?
Well, you start on social media and start looking for all the Christopher Whites you can find.
That was an easy job.
Yeah, we hit a couple of dead ends along the way. And then working with the production company that worked with 7 Films, we actually got a private investigator on board who found Christopher White still in PE, still driving a Mercedes-Benz.
So who knocked on his door?
The production company, Lawrence van Rensburg, knocked on the door. Said, "Hi, Mr. Christopher White."
Remember that accident 30 years ago?
Yeah, and he remembers it.
Did it take much convincing?
No, he was very up for it. We didn't tell him exactly what it was about because we wanted that authentic reaction. So he didn't know when we got to Chapman's Peak exactly what we'd be doing.
All right, so what happened when you took him to Chapman's Peak? Am I correct in assuming, I think I've heard you correctly, that you were putting him essentially behind a driverless vehicle?
Well, it's
to all intent and purposes.
It's a vehicle that has autonomous capability.
Okay.
It still needs a driver in the seat.
But it can take control of itself in a dangerous situation.
Yes, it can.
And when you said to him, Chris White, this is what you want you to do on Chapman's Peak, where you had an accident 30 years ago, what did he say? Thanks, boys, I'm back to the Eastern Cape.
Yeah, he obviously took a moment and thought about it. And I'm sure the emotions kind of just crept back into the day of his accident. This was clearly, you can see from the documentary as well, this wasn't something that he would just easily agree to when the moment came where he had to get behind that wheel and let go of his hands and trust the vehicle completely.
Come on, tell us what happened then. I mean, the guy must have been terrified.
Well, like I say, he didn't know what was going to be happening. So over the course of a couple of days, he had been reliving this accident through the interviews, etc. So when you get there, I mean, he tried to put on a brave face, but as you can see...
How did you break the news to him? By the way, Chris...
Yeah, Chris, you and I are going to be doing this in the S-Class, but the S-Class is going to be doing the driving. He was afraid. And I think even if I hadn't driven off the side of the cliff, letting a car do the driving takes a bit of a leap of faith.
Yeah.
He crossed the leap of faith, so once it had happened, what happened when he got out the car? I presume you gave him something to settle his nerves, yeah?
Well, he was absolutely relieved and was very grateful. Amazed by the technology also, firsthand. It's amazing what these cars can do nowadays. And, you know, in our flagship S-Class, this technology exists predominantly to save lives.
What are you hoping to achieve from all of this?
Well, I mean, I think from a Mercedes-Benz point of view, there's certain key pillars that are very important for the brand. And innovation is a massive pillar. They've been at the forefront of innovation throughout the brand's history. And I think this is another big build on that pillar of innovation. So it's just about driving those messages with amazing proof points like we've got in this car.
30 years on, and you're a creative guy, why does this ad still remain a talking point, that we can have a fresh conversation in 2018 and still get worked up about it?
I think it's a miraculous story to some degree, and those things will always have some kind of relevance. But I think also
But even more so, Brad, in advertising. I mean, if advertising has a relevant or an impactful narrative, then it's going to work, and brands don't often get that.
No, and the other thing that does help this is the element of nostalgia, particularly within a local context, because you're triggering something, you're triggering a feeling of nostalgia, but then you're imbuing it with this forward-facing element.
So is it too early, Miles, and this is a final question, to gauge reaction to this?
No, not really. I mean, what
are your customers saying?
We've had enormous reactions to this, or positive sentiments to it. You know, surprisingly, we have had a a stat that we're quite proud of. We've created a 5.5 minute documentary style video where everybody tells us anything longer than 30 seconds, 15 seconds is not going to fly.
Really true, yeah.
And between us and the creative agency, we took the leap of faith, and we've got a 65% view-through rate on YouTube. That is amazing stat. That's pleasantly surprising. As Brad say, what is your saying, Brad, about good content?
Doesn't matter how long it is, it's a good idea.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Guys, thanks for letting me wallow in a little bit of advertising nostalgia. I really enjoyed this. Thanks very much indeed. This is Mags on Media. Next on the program, why a luxury whiskey brand is putting its weight behind social entrepreneurship. A little later, why inclusivity is proving to be good for business in this tourism advertising campaign for the American city of Las Vegas.